Maclunky.
Hello everyone, welcome to another special video presented by Maclunky Gaming. Today we're going to be going over my deck list from the recent Cantina Clash that happened this weekend, Lando Blue. With me, I have Pasqwalle and Numberguy, otherwise known as Phil. We are these two are the creators of the deck, while I recently took it to both top finishes at the last event. Let's get into it. So, Lando Blue. This is the hottest that we were able to come up with. Of course, as always, if anyone knows me, I am not the master genius deck builder designer of decks. My teammates, they build their deck, they say, play this, I shut up, I listen, and I play the deck. Brought it to Cantina Clash. It had a great showing. I excelled way better than I could ever expected going into the event, and had results that were really, truly amazing. I'm really happy with my performance and I played, but a lot of it just was, the deck was placed in a great time and a great spot. So let's get into how the deck came to be, how I even ended up in this position. Philip and Pasqwalle, you guys were the main progenitors of this list. We talked about it a whole bunch, in our team chat and discussions. I know Philip had, the most experience coming from Han 1. As we make with jokes, a long time, this is your protege, this is what you've came to be, and so you were just trying to grasp feeling of that again. Please tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons why the Han Solo from Spark of Rebellion is so good is because it allows you to do this 5, 6, 7, where on your turn 4 you get to spend 7 resources. So Lando allows you on your turn 5 to spend 8 or maybe even 9 resources. So if Han Solo was good, well, then Lando's flip should be, if not as good, at least pretty close. And with the power level overall going down, it sort of seems like the best thing to look at.
So Pasqwalle, you also had not as similar, you're playing a lot more controlled decks. How did you come to try to build Lando?
Yeah, I played Han in set 1 and 2. It was my first PQ top, was actually Han 1 yellow in the Boba meta. So I loved the leader a lot as well. And with rotation, I was waiting until we got a full spoiler. Obviously, I'm away with limited internet access. So it was just trying to come up with what would surprise everyone and what could do well. And I just think, as probably most people do, the credit mechanic is inherently very strong. So my first look at A Lawless Time was going to look at the credit leaders. So I think I started with Krennic, and I think like most people have come to realize, the villain top end is just in a mess of a spot. So Krennic wasn't really cutting it, and then immediately went over to Lando, and yeah, felt the power of the flip turn, and the top end is there as well. And that's kind of when I dragged Phil in, because I am away. I am working 7 days a week, more or less. And Philip's a grinder, and I knew he would like the deck. So I was like, I need someone who's going to put in a lot of games, because I can only do so much while I'm here on the cruise ship. And yeah, from there, we just started tweaking what we were dealing with in terms of percentages of the Lando ability. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to play.
So let's get into the Lando ability then. Of course, everyone knows that this deck list, anytime you build a Lando deck, there is the classic thing where you have 3 different, for whatever the colors you picked, whether it's blue that we picked here, green, or anything else, you can build it in 3 different ways. What deck are you going to majorly name off of your Lando flip? And for this list, we named heroism. We found that heroism just provided the best overrate. The other colors had different strengths and different abilities that heroism didn't really have. When initial testing, like blue, it had so much amazing like space hate. You'll see it in our sideboard later on, but just having that all in main means you're just amazing into all the absolute space decks, but you just completely miss the other amazing top end that heroism or yellow would provide. And it's just too tough to give that up. So it's just better to just shore you early to be able to provide to get to late game. Now, the other main question about the deck is going to be the splash versus 30. Pasqwalle, I know that you were so focused on splash base at the very beginning. You spent so much time trying to fight for it. Tell me what you ended up with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be foolish not to try it, right? There's a lot of really good splash stuff. So we were trying the 27 for a long time, honestly. Mostly splashing Zeb and a little bit of Jin Urso as well. She's a really powerful unit that you would just wipe out the command aspect, and you can play her as a 2-drop. But in the end, I felt like I kept losing exactly 27 health. So it was a lot of games where aggressive negotiations would finish me off, or some other pump, or just Boba Pilot. The second Devastator would take me to 27 every single time, and it got really frustrating. And to the point where I was like, you know what, Zeb is really strong. These cards are really strong, but we genuinely just need 3 more HP into a lot of these matchups. And I think Philip maybe had a similar experience where obviously in games you're just not going to draw the card, so you're just sacrificing 3 HP for no reason, and the downside seemed to pile up the more we played the deck.
Yeah, I think the 27 health base, it's just a little bit too cute. Like, it's great when it works, but there's just too many games where it's like mediocre and you just gave up 3 life for nothing, essentially. It's just, yeah, not worth it.
I've had equally many occasions, while playing in the recent tournament where I'd get to like 28, 29 and just barely stabilize the game. You remember like the on-stream Tada getting me to exactly 29? Of course, we both made a mistake the turn earlier, but I still would have, if I was playing Splash Base, it would have been the game over right there that moment. Now going on to the list. So there were 2 big constraints, placed on us by playing this list, and Philip is going to tell us all about them.
Yeah, so first of all, we decided to call heroism, which means that essentially, as far as the main deck goes, you can more or less only play heroism cards. Maybe you could play like 1 or 2 off aspects heroism cards, but you already want to have some of those in your sideboard. So if you also start to have them in the main deck, the deck just gets way too inconsistent. Sometimes missing on a single Lando trigger can just straight up lose you the game. So you don't want to have a 10% chance to just lose the game. The other constraint is that we found in our early testing that Faith in Your Friends is a really powerful card. So we need to run enough yellow cards in order for Faith in Our Friends to actually trigger on a consistent basis.
Now, Faith in Your Friends was best often seen played on either turn 1 or into the late game. So now let's get into our turn 1 plays. Speaking on Faith in Your Friends specifically, this card seems a little weird in a control deck where we're just going to be making kind of like aggressive units where they have no defensive value, they are very easy to kill, and they are mostly used to go into base with any other deck. What I found in testing was Faith in Your Friends, when you made the 2 spies, you put this pressure on your opponent where they have to sit there and think, all right, do I want to spend now 2 actions to deal with these spies? I want to ignore the spies and go to base. Honestly, those 2 actions and spend it, the damage not on your base is another turn for you to start just hitting 8 drops and immediately take over the game. Pasqwalle, I want you to talk about Commence Patrol.
Yeah, I think we were looking for a lot of 1-cost cards that you could go turn 1 cost into Lando ability and generate their credit, so you can essentially play a 4-resource turn or just have the credit already and then start playing on curve into your flip turn. Commence Patrol is honestly the best option. We tried a lot of different things, from Furtive Handmaiden to R2 Pilot, and we'll talk about some of those later. But Commence Patrol stuck around because the deck is relatively weak in the space. So the 2/2 token can put pressure on decks that aren't starting in space, while also trading into a lot of the 3/2 turn ones that Luke and other decks are playing. So it gives you a little bit of a space presence while also generating the credit you need for later, and allows you to play ahead of curve on any of the turns you feel like you need to.
All right, Philip, now please tell us about, I believe, the best turn 1 play in our deck, Yaddle.
Yeah, so Yaddle is one of the better 2/4s. It's a 2/4 with a Restore 1 and an on-tag ability that gives all the other Jedis Restore 1. And we do have other Jedis. We have the Ezra Bridger as a follow-up turn. So what you can do in this deck is you can actually mulligan really aggressively after some of these really good turn 1 plays, like a Yaddle. And then if you miss, you can make a credit. You can still make a credit on turn 1, and it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, there's a lot of situations in this game where we really are spending all of our time trying to get to the top end and trying to just push through. And so we're, as best as possible, trying to stop our opponents from at all ending the game before we hit 6. So let's start talking about how we stop them. First of all, you'll notice Blue Ace Fireball. This is our space hate. If we're in against any pilot matchup, that you are just aggressively mulliganing for your space interaction. If you don't hit it, you're just hoping you hit the one of the other two. Philip, I want you to please tell me about Grassroots Resistance.
Well, I think this is a rather shitty card. I mean, really, it's amazing that we can build a deck that works with Grassroots Resistance. Like, it is one of the first cards I am ready to take out of the deck as soon as I have anything better coming in the future sets. But right now, the options are just really limited, and this is one of the few cards that is heroism that actually makes sense to play, because that's the big constraint. When you said you want to call heroism, well, you restrict the card pool to cards that have heroism in it, and if you look at the interaction cards in that card pool, it is very limited. So Grassroots Resistance, we don't love it, we're ready to get rid of it, but it is what we have.
And Pasqwalle, what about Kanan?
Yeah, Kanan is there to really keep a lot of decks honest. I mean, if you do that turn 1 credit, commence patrol, or just turn 1 credit on turn 2, a lot of times you'll see a Vader pilot come down in certain decks, and all these lightsabers on things, and Kanan can return your opponent's turn 1 play to their hand and, essentially blank 2 of their turns while you basically skipped your first turn, and now you've got this 3/4 restore 1. It's just extremely powerful. We're not splashing anything anymore, so you're never going to get the kicker effect of bouncing something bigger. But it's just really, really important to have some sort of upgrade hate in these colors, and they don't really have too much. And Kanan's able to do that on the early turns, and we've seen a lot of decks jam upgrades or jam pilots into their deck to try and race these aggressive negotiations decks.
Yeah, of course it's there. We're going to just absolutely just destroy anyone that's trying to set up for a turn 2 drop, but it's also just there as our secondary effect. You get in here and you don't get a Blue Ace or Fireball, great. We're going to Kanan bounce the one ship you play. Jin, one of the best decks of the day right now, needs the Rebels to die. You bouncing their 2-drop Rebel means that they're not drawing cards from it, and you're kind of just in the back super behind tempo. But the rest of our deck needs to hopefully, continue to get us to the bottom, the rest of our curve. So get into those cards. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Lothwolf. This card isn't necessarily a turn 1 play that we had in the turn 1 slides. It is your go-to card against aggressive negotiations, because the active game state and end state that you want is to set up a double sentinel in both arenas and just lock them out from playing aggressive. And just the cheap, super cheap sentinel that stalls the one action turn, the one unit they have, so then you can then play a bow or play a liberty to finish them off, is how you just beat those decks. And then I would like either of you two to please tell me about the other 3.
Okay, so I mean, I would like to talk about the Lieutenant Gorn, right? Like, I think one thing that really changed this game is when they came out with all these 2/4s. So suddenly, ever since Lightning of the Force, everyone has been playing a turn 1 2/4, and the effect was that a turn 1 3/5 was just not as good anymore because it did not kill your opponent's turn 1 play. So, well, Gorn sort of solves this issue. Just the fact that we now have access to a 4/4 stat line to trade into your opponent's turn 1 2/4 just makes a lot of sense. It's like why I want to have Gorn in many of the matchups. I just want to play a 4/4 that takes out their turn 1 play. And unfortunately, I mean, I like Ezra. It's a great ability, but Ezra's ability can't buff himself. He's still 3/5. So and trade into your opponent's turn 1 play. He often makes the board situation complicated. You don't know, should you go base, should you try and trade? Gorn, it's more simple. Like, they lead with a 2/4, you play a 4/4, and then you trade.
Yeah, and Ezra, like Philip's saying, is mostly there to combo with Yaddle and Kanan to try and get these extra buffs off and create really favorable board states later, but he's not the greatest turn 2 play into a lot of matchups unless you open with Yaddle. Gorn, while I'm not the biggest fan, like Philip says, serves a really important purpose because of the 4/4 nature, and we're trying not to die. So being able to kill a Qi'ra and only let your opponent draw maybe 1 or 2 cards instead of extra because you're having to waste all these actions to get rid of it is really, really important. Ezra can also buff the Lothwolf if that ever comes up. Kind of an interesting thing that Tyler decided to include because that slot has just been like, what do we play? There's so many bad cards out there, and Lothwolf did look really good on stream, so it was a smart addition there. Lando, just a really, really annoying Sentinel, very Churret-like, very Typho-like, right? Really hard to remove. We saw Vel struggle to remove it consistently. Just a really powerful unit, and one that is one of the few like really, really strong things printed in a lawless time in the mid game.
Yeah, it's definitely the card that you most want to see into any of the ground matchups. As long as they're not playing Beguile, this thing sticks, and you get just so much value off of it. It'll either take 2 or 3 units for them to be able to kill it. But all these cards serve a purpose. They're just there. We're just trying to distract our opponent, fight these units, kill these units. And this allows us to get into where the deck shines. The 6 resource turn, we flip Lando, we make 2 credit, 3 credits total, and we're at 9 resources to play our top end. I'm going to be frank here and say that Mandalorian, Liberty, and Bo-Katan are the best top end we currently have post-rotation. There is nothing stronger you could be doing than playing one of these cards or multiple of these cards, action after action. Qui-Gon, I'm going to talk specifically about. He, on first rate, does not seem like the strongest, ability to effect. 7 costs, 7/5. It's kind of weird on our curve where we want to go from, immediately from 5 resource to 8 to 9. It allows us in certain matchups to, 1, be able to answer 2 units at a cheap effect. So when, opponent has set up credit hate, you can go on to 6. You can play, your Lando, make a credit, set up or flip, and then into 7, if we're still stuck off credits, go and, Qui-Gon try to kill 2 units, set up our board, keep surviving, so we get to the 8, 8, and the 9, plays after. But I would like you gentlemen to tell me the glories about our, the Mandalorian, Liberty, and Bo-Katan.
Yeah, I'll start here
Well,
just because I've been calling. Oh, sorry. I'll cut you off here, Philip, because I've been saying that Mandalorian is the best ground unit printed in a lawless time, and he came out in Secrets of Power. This card is crazy. I feel like when I started the deck, I think I started with maybe 1 copy, and after a few games, it was like immediately 3. Qui-Gon was a 3 of to start, and the card is just so good. It's cross arena removal. There's a lot of 6 HP leaders now that are being played, so you can kill leader, capture a space unit. It is my favorite unit in a lawless time because it just wasn't playable before, and so yeah, Mandalorian has been an MVP, and it's a big reason why I started to really love the deck. I think the card is just incredible.
I think this is where we have to think about why do we even play Lando. With Han Solo, the whole idea was to get to the 5, 6, 7 and then use your 7 resources to play a big 7 drop. With Lando, it's similar. You want to deploy Lando and then use 8 or 9 resources on the 5th turn of the game. So you really have to look at, for the entire card pool, what kind of payoffs are there. And well, the best payoff for 9 resources is definitely Bo-Katan. Like if you look at the card pool, there's just no card that comes close to her. And so you sort of force yourself into vigilance, you sort of force yourself into heroism, because all the other bombs are like yellow heroism. And as much as I agree with Pasqwalle that the Mandalorian is great, I think Liberty is one of the best legendaries of a lawless time.
It's by far one of, if not the strongest cards. I will say, when a new player takes this deck, they're going to go from 6 to 9. They're going to want to just slam Bo-Katan every time, every going. And you need to understand that once you slam Bo, like that's it. We've now tapped out of our top end. We now have to take 2 turns to resource up to get back to 8 to keep going. So in a lot of situations, if you're not just like winning the game on the spot off of Bo-Katan, you need to set up, Mandalorian Liberty to just go 8 and 8 and then be able to take the actual control of the game. If you slam 1 card and the game doesn't end, you will just lose the game instead. So you need to really understand what point and what top end that you need to play in this situation in order to win after doing the super strong effect.
Yeah, Bo has very specific matchups where you actually want to do the 6 to 9. It's the cool thing, right? But it's often not the correct thing. And oftentimes doing 8 8 and then 9 way later is like the way better play. And I think that's why I've become such a fan of Mandalorian. But yeah, as Philip pointed out, it's no secret. It's an $80 legendary. Liberty is very, very good.
So now that we've talked about, the main deck, the list, and how we get into it, let's talk a little bit about the sideboard. So this is my sideboard from the recent 3v3 event. I made some little, changes to it that we'll discuss later, talking about like future changes, but most of the cards here have stayed the same. We have essentially 3 cards for any of the other, ground matchups that we're super favored in Galen Urso and Jam Communications. Jam's role is pretty obvious. It's just a 1-cost upgrade that's trying to discard aggressive negotiations. It has slight, effect where you can hit, other decks like other Landos that are playing the more heavy blue removal, or any other decks that has like kind of interaction and events that you are scared of. Things that come to mind: Commence Festivities. It's one of, if not the strongest card that was played against me at the recent weekend. So be prepared for that, the count to that to go up in red decks. It is so good, and because we have to resource, turn after turn, we're definitely going to be ahead of them. I would be jamming Communications on Commence every time. The other card that absolutely all-star stood out for me, no matter what, Galen Urso. This card, on paper, it was never really like the strongest thing going into last set and before rotation, but coming into Lawless Time, where decks, even though they're like super fast and super hectic, it's kind of played in a different way where they're all about kind of specific. So when you play Galen, it's always there to hit a very specific target. And in this deck, we need to hit a lot of different things. And so having that versatility in Galen really shines. I had like 8 or 9 different judge calls the past weekend, just asking judges, all right, can I name this with Galen? Can I name this? Can I do this with Galen? Can I do this? The card is so versatile. Naming aggressive negotiations, shutting down, damage there, naming Convince the Festivity, naming a Sentinel to get through for a lethal swing, naming, Clone Ship Invader. You can name literally anything in any deck, and it'll have value in it. It's just the foresight and the knowledge of what you need to name and prepare for in the matchup you play against. So when used right, it's an incredibly strong card. Now, the other cards in the sideboard, the other 7, the main bulk of our sideboard is pretty obvious what we're going to be doing here. We just need to not die to any of the Space Swarm. Our main deck has all the ambushers prepared for us, but I'm going to let Pasqwalle talk about the only 2 blue events we have available.
Yeah, the ambushes are good, but they're often not enough, especially when Vader's spitting out tokens the whole time, and you can't kill the Luke pilot leader when it flips onto a big ship. So Tree Remembers doesn't do that, so you need Hyperspace Disaster. But these are also the cards in the side deck that we don't want to be running, right? Because they're going to inherently lower our chances with Lando. And that was, I feel like, most of the discussion that Phil and I had constantly was what's an acceptable percentage in the main deck to have. And obviously our goal was keep it at 100, and that's where we landed. But we did find, there were some versions that maybe had 2 True Members in the main or a card here or there. So we were willing to experiment with 1 or 2 cards, but I think 2 was where we both would cap out. And eventually it was like, we can just bring these in for game 2 and 3 and shore up those matchups. But this way, game 1, we get to do our game plan the entire game, and we will always hit, and hopefully it works out that way. And then with Tantive, again, it's just a heroism card. It's not particularly amazing. It's not what you really want to be doing with your 7 resources, but it will keep you hitting with Lando while also giving you 2 bodies in space. And yeah, I think the side deck are just cards that we are hoping to replace with heroism cards eventually. Hyperspace Disaster probably sticks around and holds value just because it's a massive board wipe. But I think everything else is kind of flexible depending on what future cards we get and what your meta is, honestly.
So, Philip, going off what Pasqwalle said, the blue cards, why are they in the sideboard and not on the main board? Why do we want to keep 100% hit rate in game 1?
Well, I mean, I've played this deck enough to know that sometimes you will use Lando's ability, and if you miss just that one time you use it, you just lose the game on the spot. And even if you hit, it's not like you win the game on the spot. So every time you add a card that is not a heroism card, well, that's 2% of chance that you're just going, if you're in that spot where you need to hit with Lando's ability, which happens, in my experience, like in a lot of games, well, you have a 2% chance of just losing the game. I don't like to have a 2% chance of losing the game. Like when you play against really, really good opponents, like your edge is not going to be that big. Maybe you're going to have like 60-65% win rate. If you give up just 1%, 2%, it's massive. So that's why I think you really want to make sure that the card you add that is not a heroism, that adding that card to your deck alone gives you more than a 2% point win rate. And to be honest, that's really difficult.
Yeah, no, makes 100% sense. I totally agree with you. You know, these cards shined up where they're exactly where needed. They are our hedges for Chewbacca. They are the hedges to deal with space, and you need them desperately in those matchups. But against anything else, they are just not worth the card. It's if it just kills you in a match, you know, when you're playing against ground, it doesn't matter if it's really great for a space deck because you won't even get to play that round because you've already dropped to the event. You already just lost to the ground deck because you messed up the one action that was going to absolutely leave you whether winning or losing. So we just went over the list in the sideboard. It took a lot of time and effort, and God, these two discuss so many different cards, you know, over the past, you know, couple of months of from the end of last meta to now to when we start to see, you know, any of these things. So I want to go into the notable cuts and things that, you know, you two gentlemen have tried and failed to find a place in this deck.
Yeah, I think like you had a couple slots like Lothwolf and Lightmaker specifically, so that's what 5 slots that were kind of in flux for I think the two of us. And for a while it was a lot of space stuff. So you'll see here the Ghost that was often paired with the R2 pilot. The Ghost is there because obviously it's a big chunky space sentinel that we can get out early thanks to Lando. R2's a free pilot. We'll give it the upgrade it needs to become a sentinel. It also can get an experience token from Ezra Bridger, which will then also, you know, make it a sentinel. Moral Authority was in the deck for a really long time, which can also go on ships that can give it the Sentinel and also can capture something. So there was a lot of synergy there, but it oftentimes just never lined up. And despite the Ghost being a good body, it just came down a little bit too late, similar to Coronet. And all these things like were kind of in and out of my list specifically. I think Philip fell off most of them before I did. Yeah, the other cards here, Phil, if you want to take a talk about Anakin and unmarked credits.
Yeah, I mean, I was always very wary of the unmarked credit. It's amazing if you have a turn 1 and you get to make 2 credits on turn 1, and then suddenly you go in, you can play a 5-drop on turn 2. But I really just didn't like the 2% chance of missing on Lando's ability. And I mean, also, like, just think about it. If you make a credit with unmarked credits and then you miss on Lando's ability, well, then, I mean, you just did the same as if you just made a credit, right? I think the card here that I had a really hard time giving up on was Captain Rex. I thought the 7/7 stat line and the conditional sentinel was just going to be too good. I was going to have it because, you know, you're going to play it with a credit on like the 5 resource turn, but somehow it's just a little bit too aggressive. It didn't really line up with the game plan that we wanted, so we ended up also cutting that one.
Too often in times on the 5 resource turn, you would spend more effort and time trying to just play a 4 card and then just play the Lando because you want to spend the rest of your turns just trying to delay your opponent as much as possible. But, you know, we've now sit here and talked about, you know, the deck, the construction, how we've done it. We brought this deck out. I imagine everyone's Carabast, you know, games are absolutely swarming with Lando. So now we're going to hear to offer the solution. How do we beat this deck? Honestly, it's pretty simple. You just absolutely destroy the credits. I have these 3, you know, these are the ones I told on stream during the winner's review of like, all right, this is how you're going to beat the deck. In this order, it's Gorn, it's Arvel, and it's Galen. I'm going to go and talk a little bit about Gorn because why I do believe that Gorn is the strongest card against Lando, it's because of the 4 health. The 4 health on 3 is so hard to deal with in Lando specifically because so much of our early curve is a bunch of random grass resistance, only does 3 damage. There's not enough that answers a 4/4, in this deck. And so you'll find many times, like, you're in a matchup, like you're playing against yellow. A great point to see and look is like when on stream, when I played the mirror between the Lando Colossus, the early games were totally just dominated by, all right, how does Gorn versus Gorn end up? Are both players, do they both draw the Gorn? Are they both fighting the Gorn or trading the Gorn? Do they have ways to protect their Gorn while dealing with the opponent's Gorn? This card is the best thing to beat Lando, and it's the only card in Lando to beat itself. So you have to, if you're playing against someone with, yellow cards, please, dear God, please make sure you're prepared for going on 3, because if you can't answer it, they are just going to absolutely just, absolutely roll over you. Now, Pasqwalle, tell me about Arvil.
Yeah, Arvel, obviously very good because unlike Gorn, it has a when played ability to destroy a credit and deal the damage to a unit. The issue with Arvel in general is it's got 3 HP, so Ezra and Grassroots Resistance, a ton of things trade into it really easily, so you typically only get the when played ability unless there's a random Sentinel in front of it. So Gorn is king because of the 4 HP, and Arvel is secondary because of the 3 HP, right? But it does have that when played, so there's the immediate impact where later down the curve, as Lando is about to flip, Arvel is better because it can stop that initial flip anyway, because Lando can then just make the credit and go to 8 instead of 9. But it at least will mitigate some of that, explosiveness that the deck has, where you're often going 8/8, but if you Arvel the first credit, all they get is an 8 drop. And then they can Qui-Gon and Depot, but it really just does what it needs to do in the moment.
Yeah, these two cards together are by far the scariest thing you can do. I'm so grateful that there is not many super strong leaders in the red-yellow heroism pairing. Chewbacca is definitely going to be, I think, a terrifying, menace for Lando if he shoves both of these cards into his deck. I lost, round 1 of the 1v1 event to Ryan DeCreasy playing Padme Yellow just because Gorn into Arvel was just, it's so much effort that the Lando deck needs to do in order to try to even, bridge the gap from the 6 to 8. Not even remove everything else about these colors, that they're just super aggressive units and actually can push damage way faster than you're expecting. Stopping your main game plan of having to, be able to do control by getting to our 8 and 9s. You need to really think about what your opponent's going to do to stop credits. I luckily was privileged in, this event because no one was super prepared for Lando. Everyone, some had Tada had, a lot of credit hate main. Some people had some stuff, but no one's really all right, Lando's going to be the thing that we got to beat. Well, now that it's a more known factor, someone's going into the event, they know they're going to be crediting credit. You need to be prepared to have these credit cards played against you. Or when you're playing against a Lando, you need to make sure you know how to beat their credits. If we're just ignoring the credits, we're just going face. And now I want to talk about the last card, Galen. He's, of course, hidden behind his, soldier in Lando Calrissian. You'll find this in the Lando deck itself, as we saw on stream, where if you can set up Galen plus Sentinel, there's not much that your opponent's going to do. I want Philip to tell me exactly how this ends up.
Well, actually, I sort of disagree a little bit about this, because the thing with Galen Erso is you're going to call credit, of course. And as long as he's in play, that's really annoying because the Lando player cannot use any of his credits. But the issue is that as soon as he gets off the board, all those credits, well, they come back online again. So if you don't have the Sentinel to put in front of him to protect him, then he just sort of just dies in a couple of actions, maybe next turn, and then the Lando player is like, okay, now I can spend my 4 credits and just play all the big drops in the world. So while he does sort of delay the issue, if the player cannot use this delayness to sort of close out the game, then at the end, he doesn't really do much. Also, there's also the risk that if you play the Galen Erso, then the Lando player, who's playing Vigilance himself, could have sided in one from his side deck, play the Galen Erso, name your Galen Erso, and then it loses its ability and all the credits come back online.
Yeah, great point in there. And I believe that's why we have Galen right at the third slot. It's a strong effect.
Yeah.
The 5 HP is tough to deal with, but typically when we get to 6, I don't necessarily care that I can't use my credits. I just care that I will have the credits that I can then defeat to make more, and it's kind of just looking down. It's the same idea for the 3-cost 2/4 that's in blue, where it shuts down credits. Yeah, it's good. I can't, use them, but I still have them. The issue with Gorn and Arvel defeating them is that I can't make more when I don't have any. And you really want to make sure that when you're playing any of the blue hate for credits, you are actively progressing the game to its end. If you do not kill the Lando player on 6 resources, 7 resources, then you need to find other ways to stop the credit production. Otherwise, you're just going to get ran over by the 8 drops. Now we discussed how we defend against the credit hate. What changes for Lando? Lando is a very interesting deck in that he has so much deck construction based around all the different color pairs. And so, as seen in this video, we were super constrained on heroism. And we had to shove in, we were just looking at a list of heroism cards. Oh man, if they print cards, similar to what they did for Lawless Time into sets, 8 and 9, Lando will become stronger and stronger as the card pool grows and grows and gets more and more. He's just going to become absolutely dominant.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, it's a kind of a ticking time bomb situation where, as the card pool gets better, specifically the heroism one, Lando gets better as well. I think what's interesting too is you played a Lando pseudo mirror in the finals, right? You played against a Lando Colossus, so still the same colors, but that deck was calling Cunning, right? Which was a version we had also tried. We tried calling Cunning, we tried calling Vigilance, we tried calling Heroism. We landed on Heroism being the best. But even a call Cunning works because so much of the deck is Cunning anyway. We just feel like Bo-Katan is too good not to run or to not to ruin your game plan, because oftentimes you will hit a Bo-Katan when you use Lando, and if it costs you the credit, you're going to be really sad. Bo-Katan really shores up a lot of matchups, so that's why we really narrowed in on Heroism, despite a bulk of the deck being Cunning. But the more and more that we get for heroism, Lando is just going to become a monster. I think similar to Han, right? Set 1, Han was good, Han was fun, and did a lot of cool things with U-Wing reinforcement. And then set 2, we got DJ, we got Tech. Set 3, he got more, he got maybe a card here and there, but it got to a breaking point with stuff like Faith in Your Friends and so on, that Han Yellow all of a sudden became this monster at the end of the pre-rotation format, and I can see Lando having a similar journey of becoming a terror as he gets more and more really good cards, not grassroots resistance in the deck, so that he can make use of the credits. Because the biggest thing I found in this format is HP is king. Moral Authority on paper is a good card. You just can't capture anything useful because everything has a lot of HP, and Moral Authority doesn't grant HP. Grassroots resistance only deals 3 damage. If we need things to deal more damage, deal with these big chunky haulers and stuff. And I just think the future is bright, but he is not this unbeatable monster right now.
Well, that's all we have for you today, everyone. If you'd like to see, any more from us at Maclunky, we've been streaming many PQs and events here on this channel. Thanks to the work from Tim and Claire. Do an amazing job. Please do turn to the streams. You will not be, sad about getting to watch very high quality streams and good casting. Also, on the forward of the note, if you want to see games played by Lando, I had a lot of games on stream at the recent Cantina Clash. A lot of interesting ones. The Mirror, I played in Tatata. A lot of things where when the videos or the cards that we talked about, dealing with Lando and playing against them, you saw them play out in action, how those interactions actually play out. But there's also a lot of other cool and interesting decks that are on stream, so please do check everything out. And they say, gentlemen?
Shall we?
We shall. Thank you all, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks for watching and supporting Maclunky Gaming. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.